The first album is much better than the first album.
So a little while ago, I asked you all to share bands whose debut album is easily their best. And today, I'm going to share the ones that I agreed with, starting with Entombed with Left Hand Path. Now this one really jumped out at me. I do feel like it's a pretty obvious one. I know there are some people out there who really simp for like Wolverine Blues, but come on, like as far as death metal debuts go, this is easily one of the best ones. Just the production, the songwriting, also the fact of when it came out and how influential it was, like all around from their discography to also just considering again, what an impact it made. I think this is an easy choice. Next up, we have Emperor with In the Nightside Eclipse. This one's always fun because there's always a civil war between the In the Nightside Eclipse fans and the Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk fans. But again, I am very much in the former camp. I think this is easily the best thing that they've ever done. Again, the production and similar to what I said about Left Hand Path, just how influential it was, how kind of out of nowhere it was. Nobody else was doing it like this at the time. There are plenty of cool debuts from the second wave of black metal, but like this is the one where it just leaps out at you with those symphonic editions, and even though it's raw, the production is still just so ensorceling, to use a word from the track listing. Anthems to the Welkin is also really good, but I just think this bodies it in every possible way, and I just love it from start to finish. This is where it's at. Next up, we have Morbid Saint with Spectrum of Death. Little bit of an unfair one here because they don't have too many albums, but man, talk about a debut that is just wretched. It's just so gnarly. It just punches you in the face. And like I said before when talking about this album, I think that album cover with that like goblin thing on the artwork, it just perfectly encapsulates what this sounds like. Also, unlike the first two albums we talked about, this one is very underrated. I still run into plenty of people who have never heard it. I had never heard it for the longest time until somebody recommended it to me. So can't recommend this one enough, and it will knock your socks off as far as kind of really extreme thrash metal from the late 80s goes. All right, but back to some death metal. We have Deicide with Deicide. I'm sure if I tallied up the votes from that community post, this probably would be the winner, or at least it would really be up there. A lot of people said this one. And yeah, I tend to agree. Deicide have other good albums, but this is the one I tend to go back to the most. It is just really tight, and again, it's another one where it's from those formative years of death metal where we're kind of just figuring out what it even sounds like. And just killer. It's no frills, all thrills. Really fun album. Also just really, the Satan worship is is off the charts. And so if you're into that, this is certainly the album for you. Not a bad track on it, just front to back. Fantastic old school death metal. All right, throwing something a little different in here. We have Static X with Wisconsin Death Trip. I'm sure there are some people in the audience who are going to groan at some of these, but this was another one that was voted quite a bit, and I think for good reason, because it's another discography where, yeah, this one just stands so far above everything else. I recently tier listed all their albums again, and this one is always a standout where I feel like there should be like a gap between this and even the like next best album under it. Such a fun mix of like industrial metal, new metal, and other influences. I love that they called it like evil disco music is basically kind of the perfect description for it, and they nailed it. They nailed it right out of the park, and they never quite came close to it again. I think Cannibal is the closest they ever got to kind of nailing this sound again, but again, start to finish, so many great tracks here. Of course, you got Push It, but then the deeper cuts are just as strong as that one too. So another one where, like, even if you're not really into this type of music, I can't recommend this one enough. It is just such a fun time. It always puts a smile on my face. Another one that leapt out at me when I saw it, mentioned a few times, we have Annihilator with Alice in Hell. Honestly, I could really care less for pretty much anything else in the discography. I don't think I've gone through all of their albums yet, but as far as I've gotten this is the only one I really enjoyed. Like, I listened to this debut and was like, man, this is a really good time, and the title track in particular is just excellent. I mentioned too that Cradle of Filth does a cover of that song that I really enjoy, but yeah, just that listen hell, like, it's just such a fun little little vocal hook there, and all the songs on here are like that. Like, every track is a good time, and then right after this with the next album, they already kind of fall off a bit for me, where there's still some good tracks, but a lot of filler, a lot of like sappy ballad kind of stuff that I'm just like bored to tears with, and yeah, I could really do without it. Alice in Hell, such a great time. Great thrash record, great kind of like heavy metal influenced thrash record too, so good one. Oh yeah, I've been thinking about this one a long time. Ensiferum with Ensiferum. Now, Ensiferum have plenty of albums I enjoy. They're one of my favorite folk metal bands out there, and as far as like riffs go, just balls to the wall stuff, they're great. And they have other great ones like Iron and Victory songs, but the debut is still the debut, man. They like set the blueprint with one, and I just don't think they've ever quite accomplished the same level of like mastering that sound since then. And say what you will about Yari, but he absolutely kills it on this thing, from the guitar work to his vocals. I love the little like power metal additions he kind of throws in here and there as well. But man, and just in general, when it comes to folk metal, this is probably the first album I will recommend to most people trying to get into it. I did a folk metal list not that long ago. I think I said that there as well. Incredible album, and just packed with riffs. Especially if you're a guitar player, you need to listen to the Ensiferum debut. All right, another new metal pick, and an apt one as well. Mudvayne with LD50. Another band where I could throw out basically the rest of the discography. This is the only one I ever bought a physical copy of, and is still on my shelf to this day. The copy I bought when I was like 16 years old, and I still listen to it. I still think tracks like Dig and Eternal Primates Forever and Nothing to Gain, my personal favorite track on here, are excellent. They are one of the most talented nu metal groups, I would say, especially their bassist and their drummer. Like, they're pretty technical, and then after this everything got so streamlined and kind of dull, and then they really got into kind of like rock territory with really kind of corny butt rocky stuff with really cringy lyrics. I'm just not really into it. The album right after this is listenable, but even that one, I remember even back then I was kind of disappointed. I'm like, this is no LD50, and I'll be interested to see, because I think they're working on new material and they've been touring. I'm curious to see what they could cook up. Maybe it'll be good, but who knows? But right now, this is easily like kind of the only album you really need from them. Also, for those of you who are like, that's not the debut album. No. The album before this is an EP, okay? This is the debut LP, full length.
Wrong. You're wrong.
All right, back to some death metal. We have Nocturnus with The Key. Now, Nocturnus have some other good jams, for sure, and you could even maybe make some arguments about some of the other ones there, but The Key is just so incredible, and another one where it's like, nobody else made an album that sounded like this, especially when I was going through those 90s death metal rankings by year. Like, pretty much every year there was like that one album that really stood out that didn't sound like anything else, and was like, whoa, what is this? And this is definitely one of those albums, so for them to come right out of the gate with this, and just be so forward-thinking, and then never really quite hit that level again, is pretty crazy. This is one where when I'm going on my like CD hunts and looking through the used CD sections, I'm always on the hunt for this one. Like, I would love to add this to the collection. Sure, I could just go on Amazon or whatever and buy a new copy, but I love the hunt, and this one's definitely on my list for that. All right, another thrash metal record, we have Toxik with World Circus. And kind of like Morbid Saint, they don't have a lot of records. I actually did really enjoy the new one. Like, they came pretty darn close for me to say, like, maybe that's actually the best one, but World Circus is just a jam, man. And another one that's kind of underrated, an album I don't hear many people talk about. I've heard plenty of discussions over the years growing up of like the best thrash metal records, and Toxik like never came up when I was a teenager or even like in my young adulthood. It wasn't until much later I even discovered them, and it's such a shame because this is an amazing debut. Maybe in my top 10 best debut thrash metal albums of all time. You can tell me what you think, because I'll bet a lot of you out there haven't even heard this, so please do go check this one out as well. Another good one, Obituary with Slowly We Rot. There's already, I know, a bunch of people screaming at the screen or vigorously typing in the comments. And by the way, do share your own opinions, because that's all these are. Like, there is no objective opinion on any of this. Anyone who thinks that is fooling themselves. That is just not how music and art works. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are complaining, no, Cause of Death, Cause of Death. If you ask me, Cause of Death is mad overrated, but that partially comes down to the fact that I'm just not into the doomier stuff, and so some of the songwriting on that one just doesn't really do it for me. It just doesn't. I have tried over the years with that one, and it just has never connected. But Slowly We Rot, it's got the D beats, it knows what it's doing, it gets down to business, it doesn't mess around, it doesn't waste your time, and that's what I want out of my death metal for the most part. Unless I'm going for like progressive death metal or something a little bit more avant-garde or whatever, something like Gorguts. Of course, then I want a little bit more. But when I want something like Obituary that's just like pure old school death metal, I want Slowly We Rot. I don't want them to try to get fancy and bore me. So for the few people who said this one, I fully agree.
It's the children who are wrong.
On kind of a similar note, we have Possessed with Seven Churches. Another band with very few albums. I believe they're working on another one, and I did enjoy the new one, but this is still easily by far the best. And come on, like, it is kind of the foundation of death metal. You could argue there are some other things a little bit before this one or around the same time. This is kind of the start of it all, and it's got that D beat. It doesn't mess around. I love the production with all that reverb. It's just so cavernous, and I wish I could go back in time and hear this when it came out, because I'm sure it just just blew apart people's brains, because it was one of a kind. There was nothing else like it. I mean, there's still plenty of thrash DNA in there, but it was the birth of something truly new, and I don't think they've ever really come close to it. The second album I don't really care for all that much, and so kind of drops quite a bit from there. I'll be interested to see what else they put out, because it seems like they've still got some steam in there. All right, another one where people are going to argue, is this even metal really? But whatever. I saw quite a few people voting this, and I also fully agree and needed to include it. Linkin Park with Hybrid Theory. And aside from the people who just don't even think this should be on the list at all, there's going to be the people, again, who are going to argue with Meteora being the best one, the follow-up to this. It's kind of like what I was saying with Emperor. There is a civil war going on there, where there are the Meteora stands, and I could not disagree more. I think Meteora is several steps down from Hybrid Theory. Hybrid Theory, to me, is like a perfect album. I would even go so far as to say it is a 10 out of 10 album.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
There's a few 10 out of 10 albums on here, actually, on this list. I'm not going to go through all of them, because I'm planning to do another video about that. But I do think this is like a perfect album, and that's why so many songs on it were singles, why it blew up the way it did, and whether you like them or not, you got to give them props for right out of the gate, just exploding onto the scene. Even people who never listened to metal in their lives knew this album and maybe even owned it. My sister listened to this stuff, and she could not care less about metal, especially back then. Yeah, Hybrid Theory, great pick. I agree. They've never really come close to this again. All right, a little more thrash. We have Kreator with Pleasure to Kill. This one could be a little bit more debatable. Some people might say Extreme Aggression, some people might say Coma of Souls, or maybe even some other ones, but I am partial to Pleasure to Kill, and it's another case too where that is the only physical copy of an album I own from them, because that's kind of all I need. Going through their discography is fun. There are definitely some really weak areas in there. But like when I'm in the mood for Kreator, for the most part, this is the album I continue to go back to. There's just something so infectious about that Pleasure to Kill, like that whole line. And then the rest of the album is just as good too. Like, it's not just that track, another just really fun start to finish. As far as like debuts from Germany in particular, easily the best one if you ask me. You know, as much as I like stuff like Sodom, Pleasure to Kill, that's where it's at. And then my last pick that also had quite a few votes for it is going to be Slipknot with Slipknot. Again, somewhat debatable. A lot of people say Iowa, and then there's people who say like Volume 3 and all that stuff, but we don't need to talk about them today. I've talked about them enough. You can check out my Slipknot discography ranking. A lot of the bands on this list have a full discography ranking, by the way, that you can check out. But in any case, as much as I like Iowa, the self-titled is always going to hold a special place in my heart. As I've said many times before, it's like the album that truly got me started as a full-on metalhead. There were plenty of things I heard on the radio before then. I had listened to Korn, I had listened to, you know, all sorts of other stuff. This was the first time that I like got the CD and was just mind blown, and I love the atmosphere. I love just how primal it is, and I still argue to this day that even though I listen to all sorts of insane shit now, that is much more, you know, quote-unquote extreme than Slipknot, I still argue that this is one of the angriest albums I own. By far. It is just pure, genuine pissed off. And there's no put on about it. It's just a bunch of guys who are pissed and full of vinegar, and I love that, and I still love this album, and I still think it is the best thing that they have ever done. Y'all check out this video for the most overrated metal albums, in my opinion, or check out this video for your personal YouTube recommendation. Again, share your own thoughts down in the comments, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.